Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
This is Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond. I am your host, Brenda Bickerstaff. Join me and my guests for an inspiring conversation about how they survived and thrived during this important new chapter of life. If you're an active woman in midlife, this episode is for you. So many active women going through menopausal transition are doing all the right things, exercising consistently well, eating well, yet feeling flat, sore, or not recovering like they used to. Today we're talking about why that can happen and what your body may actually be asking for. I'm joined by sports dietitian Jacqueline Shang, also known as the tennis dietitian. And together we will explore how hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause affects energy, performance, recovery, bone and muscle health. We'll dive into pre and post workout fueling, mineral interaction, the impact of undereating, and why low energy availability isn't just an elite athlete issue. Most importantly, this is all about learning how you can fuel your body with confidence during the menopause transition, so you can stay strong, active and supported, rather than exhausted or frustrated. Let's get into it. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Yep, I'm super excited to have you as well. Before we get into all the nitty-gritties of it, because there's a lot to get through, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into sports nutrition. Please and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So really I started my university through Griffith University and studied there. Had a great experience through university, and I started in private practice through university. Like I really, throughout the later years of my degree, I had a great internship with some leading dietitians in the gut health space at the time. And from there, I just really wanted to move into working in private practice. The reason I got into tennis though, and predominantly tennis, is because I've always loved tennis. And I've just been told in university that sports dietetics, it was too niche. It was too competitive. So I was told not to go down that route in uni. But I've played it all the time growing up, and I'm not great at anything, but like I do love it and I do watch it. And so I had a really incredible friend, Ali Kyrgios, who's linked me up with some of my first clients. And from there, it's just been snowballing. And I'm truly just really lucky to have met the people and to be in the position that I am in now, and to build a nutrition presence. Because for me, what I found is, unfortunately, I find that nutrition culture isn't too great in the tennis space, and there is a huge gap between where I believe it needs to be and where it has potential to go as well. And, you know, that's where I am now, is I'm really in this position to work towards closing that gap for that particular sport and for other sports as well.
Fascinating. And the other fascinating thing is that you've sort of uplifted your life from Australia and now based in China, and proving that it's a totally global business that you're setting up.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit of a decision that I have always wanted to make. I always wanted to move overseas, but I also thought, particularly for my career, particularly wanting to pursue tennis more in the future. It's a very global sport. I mean, it's only really in Australia in the first 2 months of the year, January, February, really, if that. And then really they start to move overseas. You know, you start to go towards your Asian swings and your European swings. And so it's really global. And I thought maybe positioning myself a little bit more central, a little bit where it's geographically easier to get to the rest of the world, it might be a bit more advantageous for me.
Is your goal, and I know this is just a little side track here, is your goal to like work on the tour or work with some of the top elite tennis players in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to work with some of the top players in the world, working on their nutrition. I think it's a really niche and interesting area, particularly because prior to tennis, I've worked with a lot of endurance athletes in all types of areas. And I do see tennis as endurance athletes. I tell my athletes a lot of the time, I'm like, if you really break it down, you're just, without going into mechanics, you're just sprinting around this little court for like 2 to 3 hours at a time, really, with these very short breaks. And so on top of that, you're getting these endurance athletes and you're asking them to go all around the world to travel from a very young age. Like people travel from when they're 13, 14 years old. And when you're asking people to do that, then it's like, well, what do you do with nutrition? Like, how does that work? Like, you'd be surprised some of the nutrition that's offered on tour. And then it's also the financial aspect, like to get such a young child to travel and to cover costs and to, flights, insurance, rackets, clothing, and then on top of that, nutrition. Like, it's a lot to manage. So, it's an interesting route to navigate.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. I'll be watching your career with interest. So hopefully in a couple of years we'll have you back and you can tell us all the inside goss about what's happening on the circuit. Well,
Absolutely.
We better get into our show because I could talk about that forever. And we're talking about women going through menopause transition. So really from that 40 plus right up to 70 odd. And we're looking at, a lot of us are still really active, but I think what we need to do first is go right back to the basics and look at Nutrition 101 and start with what is a macro and what is a micro and what basically do they do for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So really at the basis, they're just providing like the macro and micronutrients. They're the sole nutrients that we need to be able to support our bodies. We've got your micronutrients like maybe your zinc, your magnesium, like those types of foods, your iron. And then we've got some of your macronutrients, like we've got your fat, your carbohydrates, and your protein. And all of these work together hand in hand to be able to form our energy and really fuel our bodies together. I think, I know we're going to dive into a little bit deeper in a minute, but also I think some people are starting to think about focusing and putting some types of macronutrients and micronutrients on a pedestal of, we've got to focus on iron, we've got to focus on magnesium, we've got to focus on protein. But really, we've got to focus on them all together as a whole. And that's the important thing. And that's the difficult thing to know how to do that really well.
I remember just going back into the 80s when fat was the demon and no one ate fat because, God, you're going to get fat if you're going to eat fat. But it's so not true. And it's like carbs now get such a bad rap. But just like Absolutely. You're saying, they've all got to work together.
Absolutely. They've all got their place. And, I'm really big advocate on carbohydrates, particularly in athletes, particularly in just everyday people. Like, I think a lot of people are separating the difference between the types of carbohydrates we've got. For example, we've got our complex carbohydrates and our simple carbohydrates. Now, I think when people think of carbohydrates, the average person, if you're asking someone off the street, they might think of carbohydrates as, foods that are in lollies, foods that are in cakes, like discretionary foods. But I think we need to think of it as a bit more than that, right? And it's not to say don't have those foods at all, but everything has their place. For example, I think some people are looking at carbohydrates as your pasta and your bread as well, but they're putting them in similar categories. And they're like, I heard someone say one time that we shouldn't have carbohydrates all the time. Maybe someone meant we shouldn't be having these foods like simple carbohydrates, like table sugar, that kind of thing, or sugar that goes in baking or something all the time. And people are starting to bring it to the complex carbohydrates, which are really important for our fuel as well. So yeah, there's a huge conversation around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole.
No, that's fine. But this is nutrition now is a massive rabbit hole because there's so much out there and there's so much misinformation as well. So that's why it's fantastic to have you here to help set the record straight.
Yeah.
So with menopause, let's jump into the menopause because this is what all these listeners are wanting to find out about. So with menopause brings the hormonal changes. Now, with these changes, how does that affect our energy and performance recovery, all those really important aspects we need for sport or whatever we do?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's hard to speak for everyone. All situations are very unique, particularly everyone's process and journey through menopause. However, it's essentially just like a second puberty. So your body's going through changes physically, mentally, sleep patterns, daily energy, joint and muscle aches, mood swings, hot flushes, and you might be feeling one of these signs, you might be feeling all of these signs. So, your body's making all these changes to be able to go from a process where your first puberty is really helping you set your body up for, reproduction. And then the menopause is really moving out of that phase. And it's that kind of like that second puberty. So you'll feel all these hormone changes, and that is a huge change in itself.
What are some of the nutrition-related challenges that you see most during this time?
A few changes particularly that come to mind, particularly taste, cravings. Some people might be craving particular foods over other foods. Some people might shift from being like, oh, I used to really like this food, but I don't like that food anymore. Some people might see a shift in their weight, body composition. Their body is reacting differently to different types of foods that they may eat. They may find that they might need to slightly adjust recovery times with any training that they may have. Structure in their gut microbiome is also a really huge thing. So, the gut microbiome is really like our second gut. And when we are going through all these hormonal changes, that has a huge impact too. And I think a lot of people do forget about that.
I wasn't truly aware how much you were onto the gut biome, and I'd like to just deviate a fraction because it is massive, and that's one of my big learnings over the last 6 to 8 months is how we are neglecting our gut biome, but yet that is such an essential part to make the rest of us flourish.
Absolutely.
Feel free to add.
Yeah. No, so
the question,
an analogy.
Sorry, you go for gold.
No, an analogy that I really like to use is our gut microbiome is really like a rainforest, right? If we're thinking about like the Amazon rainforest, we think, okay, what's in the Amazon rainforest? Like everything and everything, right? Every single like animal species, every single, from the smallest plant to the biggest trees. And we've got all these little insects that are roaming around in between, and everything works really synergistically to be able to make it work hand in hand. And that's what a healthy rainforest looks like. When we've got all these different types of things, we've got algae growing, we've got a million different plants growing all at once, when we've got birds flying over, when we've got animals in the river, and then we've got animals that are in the land, animals that can go between the two. What I like to explain the gut microbiome is it's similar to that. A healthy gut microbiome has an abundance of microbiota and bacteria in there. And I think some people, when they hear the word bacteria, you think, oh, it's a bad thing. No, we really want a good amount of bacteria in there. And the more populated our gut is, similar to a rainforest, the healthier our gut is going to be. For example, if we had the Amazon rainforest where it was only trees, no small plants, no insects, no animals, we'd probably look at that and it's like, okay, well, they're just trees. That's not really a rainforest. That's not really a well-diverse rainforest where things can be able to, things can fuel each other, things can live off each other, and it's similar to our gut as well. And that's so interesting because our gut is then really important for hormones, immune, digestion, and absolutely everything. I could go on and on about it.
Yeah. It's massive. It's massive. And well, I think we should have you back just to talk about the old gut because it's a fascinating area.
I'd love to.
Anyway, we better get back to what I'm saying it all the time, get back to what we're meant to be talking about. So we've looked at the sort of the hormonal changes that obviously happens through menopausal transition. Now, with the nutrition, do you see a massive difference between the needs of, say, your weekend warrior who's going out and just playing semi-competitive sport or running an ultra compared to those who are more the elite athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what they're doing, what sport they're in, their experience, etc. But ultimately, someone who's training more and putting their body under more of that stress and strain will need more requirements than someone who is maybe a weekend warrior, maybe has you know, a 9 to 5 going on, maybe kids to take care of, you know, something like that, where they're active in what they're doing in their 9 to 5 and their kids in the day-to-day. However, it's different comparing people who are full-time or you know, very strongly part-time training, you know, a good 20 hours a week in their sport as well. So absolutely there is a big difference in nutritional requirements between these two people, because we've got to think that if someone is maybe just running a 5K on the weekend, but the rest of the week, if they're quite sedentary compared to someone who is training maybe 4 hours a week, five times a week, that's going to be very different in what they're going to need each day as well.
So if you had the situation where a woman has been training consistently for years, but then she's suddenly starting to feel flat or isn't bouncing back as well as she should or is used to, what might be happening nutritionally?
It's different. It's difficult to say. Each of these situations are very individualized, and it's also very multifactorial, because it might have to do with a few other things. But, you know, in this scenario, what I usually like to do is engage with a team of people. If it is someone who is a semi-elite or elite athlete in this field, we could engage with people like exercise physios, GPs, things like that, to be able to make sure they're very well taken care of. But also, it's also just understanding and explaining to the client that you're not necessarily going to feel like the way that you were feeling in your 20s, because your bodies are changing as well. So I think a lot of the time it's just making sure that women understand that you got to give your body grace as well, that we're not going to be able to bounce back from a training session or anything like that, particularly maybe well into your 40s or 50s, as opposed to maybe when you were in your early 20s. So a few conversations around that, because I think it's a really important discussion to have with women. I think a lot of people want to just perform their best and be at their best, but we do have to understand that our bodies are changing, and we've got to change with that, especially our mindset and our expectations and our standards. Of course, especially as an athlete standard, you want to keep a really high standard, but we've also got to be realistic in terms of your recovery and how your body's changing, and you know, really work with that as well.
That's brings us nicely into the sort of that whole, I guess, starting with the pre-workout.
Yeah.
And so what should women be thinking about for pre-workout? Is there anything, should we think about it? Is it important?
Yeah. I think pre-workout training, there's two things that people particularly think of when we talk about pre-workout. Of course, we have the one side, which has been very heavily marketed and in the supplement industry, is the pre-workout powders, and that's mixed in with various different compounds, caffeine, all these types of things. And then on the other side, we have pre-workout, where people might think it's just a bit of food before you train. Now, my stance on that can vary. I'm absolutely not demonizing anything at all, but I am very pro-food first in what you are looking for. When we're talking about pre-workout in terms of powders, I think when we do have a food first option, it's just really going to help in all different types of ways. And also, it's just going to be a cheaper option for people as well, because I'm sure people don't want to spend $1 that, you know, could otherwise go to something else.
So if what would be a good example of a so if no supplements, a pre-workout type of meal, and why, or snack, why would that be beneficial? What's the purpose? Say if I was going to go and do a heavyweight session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a heavyweight session, if we're having a look at anything really small, right? Like maybe half an hour before, if we're getting some sort of carbohydrates into your body. Now, when we're talking about carbohydrates here, I'm talking about simple carbohydrates. And I know previously I referred to them as maybe foods that are high in, I think my reference was lollies or cakes and things like that. But it could easily just be foods that are like in orange juice, in dates, sultanas, dried fruit, any fruits really have these sorts of simple carbohydrates, where as soon as you eat them, they're going to be, how do I explain it? Sorry, I'm having a blank.
That's right. So that into the muscles? Is that because it's carbohydrate? Is it because it's the energy it's going to give you?
Yeah, so the energy will be a lot easier absorbed into your muscles, whereas where we're looking at complex carbohydrates, they're going to take a little bit longer to be able to be absorbed into our muscles. So when we're talking about pre-workout, we want to have a look at foods that will absorb into our muscles and get in the glucose and the sugars that'll get into our bloodstream a lot quicker. So we want to have a look at those things like, if you have some orange juice, some dates, some sultanas, dried mangoes, any type of dried fruits, any fruits really, those types of options are really great to have pre-workout.
So having because often I hear like having a little bit of banana with peanut butter on or something like that. It's the sugar we're after. Is that right?
It's the sugar that we're after, yeah. And the sugar that can digest into our bodies really, really quickly directly before a workout.
So just to clarify for our audience, when you talk about the simple sugars, they're our fast absorbing ones, and then our complex take longer. So we're after those simple ones, our sugars like fruits and lollies.
Yeah, fruits, lollies. You could go for any of those. Any fruit juices, like apple sauces, those types of things. Yeah. That's going to get sugar into your body really, really quickly.
So there would be no point having some overnight oats really if you're going to go and do a massive workout, because you're not going to get that instant energy. Generally speaking, not instantly. However, if we were having a look at a workout, maybe 11 a.m. or something like that, and you woke up maybe 6 a.m. or something and you were going to have a bowl of oats, it would absolutely help, because what we see is the sugars from those types of complex carbohydrates like the oats, they'll start to be released into the body slowly. So we will still get the energy from there, but it's more so directly before the workout. We want to be able to fuel our bodies with a bit more of a quick hit. And getting that through, like you said, like maybe a banana or, some fruits could be a really good option. And so, they all have their time and place. Yeah. So getting that instant sugar in, getting it into our muscle, that obviously means we've got energy in our muscles straight up, whether we're lifting or running. Would you like
Absolutely.
So post-workout.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do there, especially for menopausal women when we've talked a lot about the importance of protein, etc. And what are your thoughts on that? What do you recommend for our post-workout?
Yeah. Any options with carbs and protein, I always like to make sure you get those in. So speaking broadly, making sure that you're hitting your targets for your day is optimal. And a great way to get that in is after your workout, particularly if you're feeling hungry after your session as well. So a lot of people are surprised, but some easy options that you really can just reach for are chocolate milk. And I know some people hate on it because they see it as a discretionary food and they're like, oh, that's not great. But if we really look down at the nutrition, or some options like maybe the Rokabees, that has been all the craze, and for very good reason. I love the Rokabees.
What are they called? Rokabees?
Rokabees, yeah. Rokeby. Similar things like Paul's Plus protein drinks as well. Dairy Farmers protein drinks. There's been a few of those on the shelves recently. We can even have a look at other foods that have been around for a while, like our Up and Go Protein Energize. When we're looking at the nutrition components of those, they hit the carbohydrate targets and they hit the protein targets. And that is essentially what we're looking for as on-the-go option. If you're just maybe coming straight after the gym and, just needing something quick and easy. Similarly, we could have a look at other options, like if you had a bit more time to prepare, maybe you're coming straight after 10:30, 11 a.m. like gym session, and it's maybe lunchtime. We could even have a look at other options, like simple things like a chicken sandwich or a tuna pasta salad or something like that. Could be really good options as well, because when we have a look at those, we're getting our carbohydrates in from the breads, the pasta, and we're getting our protein in from the tuna and the chicken.
And this is why people, or women especially, shouldn't be scared of carbs.
Absolutely. Carbs are friends.
Wonderful. And is there any sort of advice you could give, or any sort of changes that might be needed, say comparing a strength session to, say, someone who's going out on a 15K run? Is there any variation in what they should be consuming?
I think it's relatively the same, and we're just wanting to make sure we're getting our carbohydrates in, maybe some protein in as well to be able to get that in and digest really well. However, it depends, right? When we're talking about endurance, are we talking about 15, 20 kilometre, or are we talking about 100 kilometre? In that case, it would more so be the amount that you'd need as well, pre-fueling. How much can your gut tolerate? How experienced is the athlete? And then it would more so, if we're talking about an endurance athlete, the only difference there is also just making sure that we are looking at maybe hydration if it is a really long, like ultra endurance athlete. And then we're also looking at intra-nutrition. Those are the differences that I'd primarily see between these two.
What about, just the last little question I'd like to ask on this section, what about, what do people do, or women do, those ones who don't like to eat in the morning?
Yeah.
How do they get their nourishment to get the best out of their body?
Yeah. The main thing that I want to see is low volume foods, right? So when we have a look at foods, we could compare the amount of carbohydrates in bread to orange juice. And we could have a look at these two comparisons and say, we're going to get the same amount of carbohydrates in a lower volume of orange juice compared to maybe some bread. So we want to have a look at these two options. For example, we could even have a look at bread, right? We could even have a look at bread, even compare it to potatoes and say, okay, if we have these two options, what is the best option for digestion? And we can have a look at these two options between bread and potatoes. And when we have a look at the bread, if we're maybe adding some honey on top for our simple carbohydrates, some complex carbohydrates, and that as our pre-workout compared to, a couple boiled potatoes or something like that, we're going to digest the honey and toast a lot easier. So it's about what can you digest, what is easy for you to get in, what is lower volume, and what sits well with you as well. And I think over time, this will change. I think I've worked with athletes over years, masters athletes as well, like in this field, and their bodies and their digestions do change. So it's not to say that, a year ago, I can't tolerate honey and toast, but now maybe because we've trained their gut, and training the gut is so important, particularly for recreational and professional athletes, really, training your gut to be able to tolerate these things. It doesn't mean that if you previously couldn't tolerate these things, that in future you still can't tolerate these things. So it's about working towards building your gut, but starting with that low volume type of food.
And if we swing back to the gut health, the training the gut, is that almost like trying to get your Amazon forest reflourishing again?
Absolutely. It's kind of like if someone came along and, spread across some fertilizer every now and again, that kind of thing. Or another way of explaining it might be like, it's like training your muscles, right? If you were able to deadlift, 50 kilos one day, and you said, I can only deadlift 50 kilos one day, I probably can't do 100 kilos ever. It's probably say, well, we can't really say that. We've just got to train you up to be able to get there. We're not going to go from 50 to 100 next week, but we're going to go from 50, 55, 60, and we're slowly going to progress you. And we're not just going to be doing deadlifts. We're going to be working around other things in terms of nutrition to be able to get you there. But you will be able to get there, and things may change. Yeah, maybe you might never get to 100, but maybe you get to 90, and maybe that's great as well. So we're always able to adapt the body and train it to be able to tolerate what we need it to tolerate. Sometimes it just takes time and a bit of strategy as well.
Midlife isn't about slowing down, it's about your comeback. At Simply Nourish, we fuel your energy, build your strength, and help you thrive through the menopause transition. Forget quick fixes. This is about real change, backed by science and led with heart. Join a community of vibrant women rewriting what's possible. Simply Nourish, stronger, wiser, and just getting started. So welcome back, everybody. Recovery does take much longer now as we age, and I feel someone who's always lifted weights has always sort of recovered quite well and could get back into it. And now I'm finding if I do a leg session, instead of being able to jump back and a couple of days later, it can almost be 5 days before I can even think about working out my legs again. So what role will nutrition play in that, or the recovery to ensure that I can get back? Or is it just one of these adaptations we have to make as we age, as our cells age, etc.?
Sorry, just to clarify, is your question around how does recovery work in
So as we age, as we go through menopausal transition and we age and we're trying to do, like I would go and do a heavy weight session, normally I could get back a couple of days later and get into it again. But now, say, for example, I'm finding my leg session, it could be 5 days between doing legs because they're really slow now to recover.
Yeah.
How can nutrition play with that? Or am I meant to, it's time, all that rah-rah-rah stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think nutrition can absolutely play a huge role in this. I think, like I mentioned before, it's really difficult to be able to switch between, going from maybe 20s or 30s to maybe even 50s or 60s to compare the difference between the two. However, if we are looking at maybe a 50, 60-year-old woman, maybe even older, and we're looking at someone who may not be fueling themselves correctly, of course, nutrition can play a huge role in making sure that we have these adaptations and we're able to fuel and we're able to, fuel your body moving forward with these types of foods. So, making sure we're fueling adequately before and after and just throughout the day really can play a huge part in making sure that you're able to recover really well for your next session.
Because we're so... you're seeing it, I'm seeing it now in the gyms that a lot of women in my age post, in the menopausal transition are trying to get out and get into the weights because we realise it's so important for our bone and muscle health. So what foods or nutrition will complement that?
Yeah, I mean, bone density is a huge topic, particularly around menopause, because what we're seeing nutritionally is we're constantly remodeling our body, our bones, and then our bodies are changing as a result of that as well. Now, this is more effective when we're younger, especially as we undergo resistance training at a younger age. But if we're doing this more consistently, particularly into the older age, it's really important because that's going to be what shapes your body as you're older as well, and the amount that you can tolerate, the amount of pressure that your bones and joints can be under. So it's incredibly important as a postmenopausal women or perimenopause or anything to look at resistance training, look at nutrition through this process, make sure you're fueling your body adequately, because what we see quite often, unfortunately, is I see a lot of postmenopausal osteoporosis, and what this is just a lack of estrogen, which is completely normal. So what we should do really is looking to prioritize a well-balanced diet, particularly also prioritizing and focusing on making sure you're getting enough calcium and vitamin D. These two are more like best friends, right? So they work hand in hand, and the vitamin D will help absorb the calcium in your body, which will support the bone remodeling. And in addition to this, we want to consider optimal protein intake as well to support the muscle that's set through, your resistance exercise, and also working closely, if it's appropriate for you, a physio or an exercise physiologist to make sure you're regularly and safely engaging in these types of exercises as well, particularly around any injuries that you may have been experiencing.
Just now talking about those micronutrients, which are our vitamins and minerals, and just for our listeners, please, it's really important that you just don't go out and just buy a whole lot of supplements. If you think you need vitamin D or anything, please see your GP or dietitian, because you may not need it, or please don't. We'll tell you I won't tell you. Jacqueline will tell you the benefits of it. So I've been told my little thing is like your macros are all your energy stuff. Your micronutrients are the keys that unlock. Would that be it?
Yeah.
And so we've unlocked everything in our body. And you've just mentioned about calcium and vitamin D working together. What do they do together?
So really, we can have a look at these kind of like a bit of a dynamic duo, right?
Yeah.
So when we're looking at calcium, it provides the structural hardness to our skeletons, our bones, and 99% of our body's calcium is stored in your bones and your teeth. And so kind of what happens is if your blood calcium level drops, your bodies will kind of take the calcium that it needs from your muscles, from your bones to be able to keep the muscles and the heart working. So it's really important that we don't let this calcium level drop, because we want to maintain all of the calcium in our bones. It's kind of like if your body doesn't get it from one place, they're just going to take it from another. And we don't want that, because that's really dangerous when we take it from the bones. Vitamin D, interestingly, it's not just a vitamin. Its primary job is to kind of act like a gatekeeper. So without enough vitamin D, our body can probably absorb maybe only 10, 15% of calcium that we eat. But when we have enough vitamin D, we can absorb even up to 30, 40% of the calcium that we eat as well. So like you said, the lock and key mechanism. So the vitamin D will kind of act as that gateway, that lock, to be able to unlock a little bit more calcium that we can consume. So them working hand in hand is a great thing, and really well together. And the RDIs that we do want to have a look for, particularly for women over 50, so 50 plus, of what we have from the government websites, is we really want to have a look for at least or around 1,300 milligrams per day. And then when we're looking at vitamin D, we're looking at 800 to 1,000 international units per day as well. So what we want to have a look for with this is, and when I do mention this, I think a lot of people may think it's hard to get it through food, which it's not. It absolutely can be done. And people might think I might go supplements, which is not a problem. I don't want to demonize the supplements or anything at all, but I don't want people to jump straight from hearing what I'm saying to be like, I need the supplements to be able to do it. It's going to be a quick fix. It's going to be an easier fix. When we do look at the supplements, we are missing a lot of the nutrients that may be coming from some of these other foods. So say, for example, if we're looking at calcium from cow's milk, for example, we're missing the extra proteins that we may not be getting through the supplements. So the supplements are not necessarily, may not necessarily be the best option if we can get the best option through food. So I think within this, working with a sports dietitian or even just a dietitian in general can really bridge that gap and making sure, one, you're not spending money on things that you don't need to spend money on. But if you do need the supplements, we will absolutely recommend that, and that's going to be the best option moving forward. My recommendation is, I just don't want people hearing this and jump straight to the supplements. That's more so where the situation is, because when we look at it as well, more is not always better as well. When we're looking at high amounts of these types of minerals or nutrients, like not necessarily just calcium, other minerals and vitamins, we can look at an unsafe level. And if you don't need that, we don't need to have these supplements as well. I don't know if I've worded that really weirdly.
You've done it brilliantly. Brilliantly. Just could you give me an example? You talked about the RDIs, and you said X amount for calcium. What would that look like? Is that like a glass of milk, a little bottle of yogurt a day, a couple of things like that? What would that look like to a woman to consume?
Yeah. So particularly maybe 1,300 milligrams of calcium. It's not too much of a difference, particularly between what we would recommend from a 19 to a 50-year-old. A 19 to 50-year-old, the recommendations are 1,000 milligrams of calcium. And so 1,300 milligrams, we're looking for about 4 to 5 standard serves of calcium-rich foods. So, for example, what we could have a look at here is maybe for breakfast, we're having like a calcium-fortified cereal with milk. Maybe one cup of milk, that's about 300 milligrams of calcium. And then if we're having like a small tub of yogurt, maybe like a 200 gram or like a small pouch or something like that, then we're looking at another 300 milligrams. If we're having a look at maybe salmon, which has calcium in it, really great source of calcium, then we're looking at about 100 grams of that, which is maybe another 250 grams. Afternoon tea, I know a lot of people love their afternoon tea coffees. Having the milk from one standard cup could even look at that 250 mils. And then for dinner, maybe 100 grams of tofu even could look at another 200 or so grams, which then reaches our 1,300 requirement, sorry. Yeah, so when we're having a look at these, even though that's a recommended amount, if we do want to have a look at that, don't just keep in mind as well, that's just a recommended plan. There's a million ways that we can adjust and do this. That's just one off the top of my head that I can think of if we're going through a day of eating.
You're just getting it out there that we've just got to be eating these food groups to get these important minerals. And very quickly on the vitamin D, would you recommend that women actually got tested for vitamin D? Because I feel that we're actually quite low in vitamin D. And now listening to you, the importance of having vitamin D in our diet there's no point eating all this calcium if we haven't got vitamin D.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we should get regular blood tests just to see how things are going. It's not the be all end all. Remember, the blood tests are only markers and things that we could have a look at to be able to support our health. However, we can have a look at vitamin D through foods, and also I think a lot of people forget through sunlight as well. When we're going out into the sun and just getting that sun exposure, of course, keeping sun safe at the same time, it can really help absorb some of that vitamin D into our bodies. So we should get tested, I think, just to see where these levels are, especially if you're having concerns around maybe osteoporosis or any bone mineral deficiencies, anything like that. Absolutely, I would recommend to go get tested. But yeah, it also can come from food as well, just to make sure we're able to support that and support the calcium intake as well alongside it.
At BBG Built, we're straight talking builders who know the value of comfort, warmth and smart design. Whether you're planning a renovation or something new, we make the process simple and stress-free. Let's help you plan well and build better. Visit www.bbgbuilt.co.nz to get started.
Back with Jacqueline Shang, our sports nutritionist. Now, we've looked a bit about fueling correctly, making sure we're getting the right macronutrients and micronutrients. There is, of course, the problem of underfueling, and we hear about it with elite athletes, but is it something that is starting or can happen to just menopausal women doing their, activities, that underfueling?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, REDS, low energy availability, can absolutely be something that we see in day-to-day people, athletes, a whole host of people. And I think it's something that we don't quite understand very well. And I was actually at the sports dietetics conference maybe about a month ago now, and we were having a great discussion around this and talking about what is REDS, what do we know about it, what don't we know about it. And really, we know a little bit. I think there's so much more to unpack about it though. So it's a huge topic. It's kind of like saying, what do we know about the brain? It's like, we know quite a lot. We're still learning a lot more about it as well though. But absolutely, like you said, like between athletes and maybe a weekend warrior, we can, and I have seen it in both types of people.
Because I've always had the impression that you look at some, like especially sprinters or those middle distance runners especially those women who are wearing next to nothing, and their body, that's all about weight for them, and a lot of them lose their periods and that. But of course, when you're menopausal, you don't have to worry about having a period because it doesn't happen anymore. So what sort of symptoms would we have as menopausal women?
No, absolutely. I think when we're looking at postmenopausal women as well, it's not necessarily, REDS isn't necessarily based on body size. So, maybe someone who has is a bit leaner, has a lower body fat mass, they're not necessarily, like a person in that sense may not be experience low energy availability or REDS. Maybe someone who has a higher, say, like body mass index, BMI, may be experiencing REDS. It comes from a whole host of factors as well. And we've also just got to compare within yourself. Maybe definitely an irregular and loss of period, irregular menstruation is absolutely a sign of low energy availability. Blood markers can also be an indication when we're looking at these sorts of types of things. However, when we're looking at post menopausal women, there are other factors that we can have a look at. Particularly, just off the top of my head, we could have a look at disruption of sleep, mood swings, depression, anxiety, stress fractures, issues with tendons, ligaments. We have a look at poor recovery, decreased muscle strength. When we're having a look at these types of things, it can come hand in hand with symptoms of menopause. However, we've got to compare from your own body and what you know as well. So if you previously were able to lift really strong, to lift heavy weights, but all of a sudden you couldn't lift heavy weights and it comes with a few other symptoms, we could consider, is this REDS, is this low energy availability between these symptoms as well?
Why do you think, or do you think there is a lot of underfueling in midlife for women?
A lot of the things, and this is not speaking on everyone, a lot of the things that I've personally seen, particularly with some clients, is around body image, around understanding that your body is going through this change. Your body may and will not look like it was, because your body is, like I said, like going through this second puberty. And so I think a lot of people start to want to look a particular way. And I think sometimes underfueling does come a part of that. I think particularly with maybe some older thoughts that we used to have, it was mainly smaller is better. But I think as just generally as a community, as people, I do think we are looking at that shift at the moment of stronger is better, and looking at strength as the form of, I guess, I don't really want to say it like this, but I guess the form of beauty or the form of what people are looking to achieve, right? And that's being the shift in what we're looking at in terms of, we know that there are like women of all different shapes and sizes that can be strong. Someone who may be a leaner person may be able to lift just as heavy as someone who may have, may be in a larger body. These two people are not equal, but when you look at them, some people might think that they may be different, but the strength in them is actually quite similar. And I think we've got to come to this conclusion of all bodies can do all types of things. We're not limited to things depending on body shape, body size. And I think that's where the conversation of underfueling can start to happen, is when maybe some people might have ideas of moving towards wanting to achieve a particular aesthetic as well.
I know, working with a few clients myself, it's quite, they're quite shocked when we talk about BMR. For listeners, that's your basal metabolic rate, which is the minimum amount of calories you should have a day just to survive if you're lying on the couch and doing nothing. And say if they're around 1,400, they're eating like 1,000. And it's then it's like trying to, just like the rainforest, slowly bring them back up just to that, because it's this whole mental shift as well of like suddenly like, oh, I'm eating so much food, but you're not.
Yeah.
And it's...
absolutely. And I think... sorry.
No, you go for gold.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people do have a look at the number, and I'm not sure if you've heard it in your consultations as well, 1,200, right? 1,200 calories. It's the number that seems to float around of people saying, you got to hit that number to be able to lose weight. However, I think a lot of people are surprised, particularly athletes, right? When I say, no, you need a lot more than that. And the number that I give them, they're really generally shocked at, and they're like, I can't eat that much. And I'm like, you need to eat that much to be able to fuel your body. And they're like, and some conversations that potentially at the start of consultations that I have with my journey and clients is, my body's going to change because of that. I'm not going to be able to perform as better. I'm going to feel heavy. I'm going to feel sluggish. And, it's a larger conversation, but long story short, I just kind of say, trust me, let's do this and see how you go. And, 100 times out of 100 times, they're feeling better, performing better, having more energy. And it's because they're eating better and they're fueling properly.
Absolutely. And it is changing that whole mindset, isn't it? And I think for, I see it in a lot of women my age who are sort of that late 40s to late 50s, when we sort of grew up through the 80s and the 90s, where everything was judged on the scale and the dress size, the fear of what the numbers say sometimes is quite overwhelming when you've got to try and change that whole mental outlook on it. So, but like you said earlier, we're actually now starting to see women embrace getting into the gym or eating more, especially in that 30-year-old group. I'm seeing it. So we've just got to train us oldies that it's okay to do it.
Absolutely, and it's great to do it as well. And it's actually really, really good for you and good for your health to do it. And I am really happy to see that there slowly is becoming a shift in this kind of phase as well. And again, for any listeners, I do want to preface, we are very much so generalizing. This is not particular individuals, very, very, generalizing conversations between these age groups as well. But absolutely happy to see the shift in looking at strength as power and as a really good thing as well in all age groups.
Yeah. As I say to them, I say, hey, the only numbers we want to see rise are the ones on the end of the barbell. And then it's
exactly.
You're heading in the right direction. So we mentioned earlier about supplements. So I just want to touch on it very briefly. So overall, you don't think they're actually necessary? They wouldn't be near the bottom of the pyramid of like people's go-tos? Or are there any that you would recommend for a menopausal transition woman? It may not have to do with sports or being athletic, but general health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can have a look at supplements as a cupcake, right? It's my favorite analogy. And when we have a cupcake, we have, the base of your cupcake, like the actual cupcake of it, like the muffin type of situation. And then what we've got on top of, we've got our icing, right? So the cupcake kind of acts as if like it's the macronutrients, like it's the protein, the carbs and the fats, and that's all really important in fueling. That what's on top is also, and maybe the chocolate chips in between, because they all work together, is your vitamins, your minerals, those types of things. They all work really well together. And then on top, like the very top, we've got the sprinkles. Now, you can't have a cupcake when you don't have the base and the icing is really important as well. But you can't have a cupcake when it's just sprinkles. In that case, it's just sprinkles. And that analogy that I use is kind of like the sprinkles is like that supplement. We don't want to go the supplement first. We need to build the base of the cupcake first. You don't have a cupcake. You don't have the sprinkle. You can't have the sprinkles unless you've actually got that base of your cupcake really nicely well baked and really and well made, really. And so what I want to say with supplements is absolutely they can be very beneficial in a lot of scenarios, but we do want to see where we can get nutrients through food first. The supplement that I would recommend and have a look at, speaking very broadly, and that we have a lot of research about, of course, everyone's individualized, but speaking very broadly is we're doing a lot of, not we as in me, but we're seeing a lot of research about creatine coming out. And previously, creatine was mainly known as the supplement to really support muscle growth, muscle health, people who maybe regularly go to the gym. However, what we're seeing now is it's having a really large impact on brain health and muscle support as well. So those two things hand in hand. So when we're looking at postmenopausal women, I would recommend creatine to a lot of people because it is a really safe supplement as well. It's found in foods like red meat. It's an easier form to get. Instead of eating a larger portion of red meat, we could have a look at creatine, and oftentimes it can be unflavored and it's really easy to get down as well. So at the moment, food first, looking at that cupcake analogy. But if we're looking at a supplement, if you told me that I had one to suggest, it would be creatine, particularly for that brain health and muscle function as well.
For the listeners, Jacqueline, if there was 3 things you would like them to take away from today, what would they be?
Oh, good question. I think the first one would be, I think our bodies are so incredible, so powerful, and that I think a lot of people underestimate that. body image doesn't necessarily correlate with strength or nutrition or worth or anything like that. And I think that's a huge message that I do want to share and make sure everyone is understanding of. And the second thing is something that we just touched on just now is food first always, where you can get your food first. However, if you do need support through supplements, they are absolutely there to bridge the gap and support you second. However, we do want to see what we can get from food first. And thirdly, I guess your relationship with food is so much more than just food and fueling. It's a lifestyle. We gather together with friends and family to, share a meal, to do all these things. So, food is fuel, absolutely, but food is also a lifestyle.
That's amazing and so beautifully said. I agree with you 110%. Fantastic. Now, when we finish our little show, I like to do a little bit of quick fire questions. So just go with what your heart thinks. So,
okay.
All right. So I'm going to give you some options here. All right. Protein, I think I already know the answer here, but anyway, protein shake or whole food?
Whole foods.
Sweet or savoury snack post-workout?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I'm a savoury person, so I'll always reach for savoury over sweet.
For hydration, water or an electrolyte drink?
Oh, it's a double-edged sword with this one. To try to keep it short, electrolytes if you need it, if you're a heavy sweater, hot and humid environment, if you're an athlete that trains quite a lot. However, for the daily person who may not be... Sorry. For the daily person, water. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Breakfast or a fasted workout?
Breakfast.
All right. Tea or coffee for you?
Tea. I don't drink coffee, interestingly.
Sweet or a savoury treat?
Savoury.
Beach walk or mountain hike?
Oh, beach walk. I'm a Gold Coast girl.
Dream dinner guest. Would you have a nutrition guru or a athletic guru?
Athletic guru. I'd love to hear about them.
I'll throw you on the spot. Who would it be?
Oh, I think the person that comes to mind is Serena Williams, Roger Federer, the greats.
Amazing. Jacqueline, it has been absolutely incredible having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your practical tips today. I'm sure our listeners are leaving with so many actionable ideas. Have you got a final thought to give to the listeners, including how to contact you and where to follow you?
Yeah. Absolutely. If you'd like to contact me, follow me through the Tennis Dietitian. Coming up to particularly some big events, I'm putting out a lot more content on there, working a little bit more on there. So if you want to see some nutrition information on there, about athletic performance, about food, fueling, supplements, if you do play tennis as well, or anyone needing nutrition support, reach out to me. I work with people of all ages, all athletic backgrounds. Send me a DM there and I'd love to hear from you.
If there's one thing to take away from today's conversation, it's that the menopausal transition isn't a time to eat less or not train harder. It's a time to fuel smarter and more intentionally. If you're an active woman in perimenopause or postmenopause and you felt tired, stuck or frustrated, this conversation is your reminder that it's not a personal failure, it's often a fueling gap. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Jacqueline for sharing her expertise. If this episode resonates, I encourage you to reflect on how you're nourishing your body, not just for performance, but for long-term health through the menopausal transition. You've been listening to Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond. With me, Brenda Bickerstaff. I'm a certified, registered and experienced nutritionist and menopause coach. I'm passionate about supporting women to thrive during menopause with personally tailored science-backed nutrition and lifestyle strategies. You can find more information at simplynourish.co.nz. We will have a new episode for you on the second Sunday of every month at 5 p.m. on Plains Media. So mark your calendar and tune into 96.9 FM and plains.org.nz or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast or YouTube. You can also support Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond by leaving a review. Stay up to date with the show on Instagram at Simply Nourish NZ and Facebook at Simply Nourish, where I also share the latest health information and strategies to support your menopause journey. Brought to you by BBG Built, your builders of choice, and Simply Nourish. Take care, trust yourself, and remember, small steps for big changes.